I'm all bundled up. I went outside. It's snowing here where I'm at, and I always kind of love it. The first snowfall is always kind of an exciting time. And I actually this weekend wanted to share a story with you because I think it's very powerful and it shows how we get to dictate how we're feeling. We get to dictate how we're feeling. Kind of a funny word, isn't it? So this woman, we're going to call her Dora. So Dora over this weekend was sharing a story about how she had an opportunity to really make an impact on a family for several years. And she gave really from her heart. And she had some really great memories about what she had experienced the last couple of years with this particular family. And you could feel it from her. You can feel it from people, especially if you're really highly sensitive. You can feel, how amazing it feels when people are sharing something that just really comes from a very loving space with nothing attached to it, right? She didn't really have any expectations. She did it because she wanted to do something for this family. And then she stops, and I thought, oh, here comes the but, or here comes the story that doesn't feel good that she is circling around, and that is now going to dictate her emotions about a past experience. So she then goes on to tell that she just had met with one of the family members that she was supporting in the last few years, and how that person's perspective was that Dora actually had invaded their privacy and had done things that they didn't approve of. And it caused Dora, when she started to talk about it, she was very frustrated and very angry and sad. Like quite a few different emotions had come rolling in. Because what she was doing is she was trying to attach her story that felt really good for her and someone else who had been observing or had been a part of it, right? Part of the story, which didn't feel so good. And she was trying to combine the two and trying to figure it out. And what we typically do in these circumstances when we have our own story and then we listen to somebody else's perspective and it doesn't feel good, we're always trying to sift through who's right and who's wrong. Always, right? We're kind of taught that as kids, that someone's story is right and someone's story is wrong. And when she started to tell me more about how that person didn't perceive it the same way she did and she didn't feel good, I said, Dora, what would happen is if you just paused and stopped and cut off the story of the other person's perspective, it's not doing you any good. Because when you talk about what you did, you can feel the love coming from your heart. And you know that whatever we're giving out in this moment is laying the pathways for our tomorrows. And I said, you're not here to change the other person's perspective. They have absolutely every right to have it. But why you're feeling the confliction within the soul is because you're trying to figure out how to interject their story upon yours, and you can't. You can't do that. You get to stop the story and you get to live in the story. We all do. You get to live in the story that you want to create. A lot of the times when these situations happen is when people are regurgitating the other person's perspective because they want some confirmation that, that this is really brutal to say, but, that they didn't do something wrong, or the other person is telling their perspective is absolutely wrong. We're trying to justify ourselves. And there's no one to justify to but yourself. And so I share this story because when we talked about her not allowing that other person's perspective to cloud or taint her experience and what she witnessed and what she felt, I said, how does that make you feel? And she said, oh, it makes me feel amazing that I had these juicy, wonderful memories. And I said, that's what you get to keep, and that's the story you tell. You don't need to tell the other person's perspective. That's their job to do it if they choose to, but you don't have to do that. You get to keep going in those wonderful, amazing, blissed out connections that she created with this family. And again, that's causing us to be more consciously aware of what we're telling ourselves. You cannot interject somebody else's perception into yours. It doesn't work. Therefore, other people trying to get you to look at their perspective, it's very difficult for most people. Now, am I saying that you should never look at anybody else's perspective? Of course not. You should always be looking at other people's perspectives to learn and to grow, not to justify, not to point the finger to say you're right and I'm wrong, or you're wrong and I'm right. Because that's the competitive side of ourselves. That's what we're always doing to one another as humans. We're trying to say who's right and who's wrong, especially these days with social media. Holy cow. I mean, people just want to shout out their beliefs about everything, just like I'm doing here, right? We all have this avenue, this venue to do it in. But you know what? It's your job to maintain your perspective if it's a high integrity, if it comes from love, and it feels good. Consciousness usually, when you're consciously awake and aware and wanting to only live in that really good, juicy, vibrational, blissful ecstasy space, that helps you to understand if you're doing something for another person because of what the world's going to look at it, or if you're doing it because for you yourself in that moment it feels really good and really solid, and it wouldn't matter if anybody saw you doing it or not. That's always a really good one too when it comes to living a more conscious lifestyle, especially for people who are highly sensitive. We have this opportunity as sensitive beings on the planet right now to understand that if something doesn't feel good, if somebody else's story doesn't feel good to you, you don't need to take it on. You don't have to listen to it. You don't have to replay it. You don't need to talk about it with anybody else. You get to remember, oh, that's their perspective, and that's okay they have that perspective because I'm secure enough in myself. I love myself enough to know that I'm only coming from a very high integrity place. So that's great. And that's how we change the world. It's an inside job for ourselves, one moment at a time. So I was really appreciative of that story that Doris shared. I hope that helps, because sometimes when we are experiencing joy and bliss and then we hear another version of it and it doesn't feel so good, you already know. You already know for yourself. You don't have to play with that other person's perspective. All right. I hope that helps. Blessings.